happening any minute now. Donald Trump will sign an order to eliminate the Department of Education. A dramatic and unprecedented overreach of his authority as president. We're going to keep a close eye on the event for you. I'm not going to make you watch it. We will bring you any updates on any news that Trump makes. Now, no modern American president has tried to do what Donald Trump is doing today. That is, eliminate an entire cabinet-level department by fiat. And technically, he cannot do it. Trump does not actually have the power to turn the lights off at the Department of Education. That can only be done by an act of Congress, and it would need 60 votes in the Senate to overcome any filibuster. But the Trump administration, as they put it today, will do everything but close the DOE. The White House press secretary today telling reporters that today's executive order will make the DOE even smaller than it is right now. That's after the Trump administration axed nearly half the entire department. The gutting of the DOE could have impacts on Americans all across the board. Here's how fired DOE civil rights attorney and president of the union chapter representing department employees, Sharia Smith, put it on MSNBC earlier today.
The American public are going to feel the brunt of it. They're already feeling the brunt of the cuts that have been made since January 21st. We have not been able to work for the American public. American citizens who have filed civil rights complaints with the Office for Civil Rights have not received any relief because we've been forced not to, and now many of our attorneys have been laid off. Americans who are applying for financial aid or seeking loan forgiveness have not received any responses or answers from this agency because those people have been laid off, placed on leave, or told just not to work. And so what we'll have with this executive order is continuation of a complete stoppage of a public service.
And that is where we start today. The aforementioned Sharia Smith joins us. We are also joined by the president of Media Matters for America, Angela Carson, and Chasten Buttigieg is here at the table. He was a middle school teacher in Indiana and author of the book, I Have Something to Tell You. It is good to see you all. Sharia, we heard you in that clip talking about what it is going to mean for people who work at DOE, for teachers. What is it going to mean for America's kids that the DOE is being gutted?
The DOE administers student loans that helped American students receive educated teachers in the classroom. I used to teach fifth grade in the state of Texas, and I was a student in the state of Indiana, where I really did benefit from amazing teachers who receive student loans. I myself am a recipient of Pell Grants, and that allowed me to go to Harvard and graduate from Harvard and teach fifth grade in Donna, Texas, where my students were able to perform wonderfully. We're the #1 state exam participants and test scores in that district. And so what you have with the elimination of the Department of Education, particularly our largest division, federal student aid, is an elimination of the pipeline for educated and talented teachers in the classroom.
Yeah, and I think about the fact, Chasten, that this move is coming when we already have a national teacher shortage crisis in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I cut my teeth as a teacher when I was in graduate school. I was on what they called an emergency permit in Indiana. We had no teachers. So if you had a bachelor's degree, you could teach in the classroom if you were pursuing your teaching license. And so I watched as many classrooms in our school had teachers leaving because they could get a better job somewhere else. The pay was low, the respect was low. That made me want to run into education. I cared so much about it. But watching these cuts happen in Washington makes me think about those teachers or students who might be on, the cusp of deciding whether or not to go into education. Do I really want to be a teacher? Is this the right career path for me? And I think this is going to scare a lot of people away from pursuing education, especially if they're dependent on Pell Grants like I was as a first-generation college student.
At a time when we have never needed those teachers more. Angela, there's a chapter on the Department of Education in Project 2025. That is not news to you. You have read through that document. You tried to warn people that this was the playbook they were going to run. The first line of that reads, federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately the federal Department of Education should be eliminated. The administration can't actually eliminate it, as you know, as anyone who sort of understands the basic mechanisms of this understand. What is it they are trying to win here? A symbolic victory?
No, they want something much bigger than that. I mean, and they've sort of been pretty transparent about it, and especially in the last few months. they see the Department of Education and more broadly the education system as sort of indoctrinating people, young people, right at the beginning, that it's basically creating a whole pipeline of, liberal indoctrination. And, they've been pushing back at that on the edges. You've seen this pop up at the states where, they're messing with the curriculum. They're replacing some books with, PragerU. You've seen it. But what they're really trying to do here is not just some, very significant administrative bureaucratic reform. No, they're trying to get rid of the functions that the Department of Education provides. And that is 30% of it is to Title I, which is for low income people. And so that is designed to punish the school districts that have low incomes. That's 180,000 teachers, bam, right there, that rely extensively or exclusively on Title I funding that they want to get rid of. And then the other part of it, and this is sort of came up so far in the discussion, is through the grant-making programs for universities and loans, to either reduce that and the stuff that you can't reduce, privatize that. But this is about culture change. It is about eliminating and reducing an educated populace. And to the extent that you are keeping it in place by giving it back to the states, we know what that means. It means more power for the already dominant right-wing narrative that we're dealing with.
Sharia, we had Becky Pringle on, head of the National Education Association, the largest union in this country that represents teachers, and she pointed us to something that had happened out of Kentucky. They'd actually been given the opportunity, voters there, to consider this question of whether or not dollars for public school education should instead be spent on private education options. I want to read you something. This is from reporting from the local outlet, the Kentucky Lantern. Jason Bailey, executive director of the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, said he was not surprised that Amendment 2, the amendment I was just referencing, failed. The opposition to Amendment 2 was bipartisan, Bailey said. It was really defeated by a huge margin in many rural counties that also voted for Donald Trump. So Kentuckians are smart. They were discerning, and they saw this for what it was. It was a scam funded by outside billionaires to shift dollars away from public schools and to fund private school vouchers. And Kentuckians, by it looks like a very wide margin, said no. I mean, if they are doing this, Sharia, for the politics of it, there are indicators that across this country, when given the opportunity and when really put in plain language, right? You're going to take these dollars that are meant for your public schools, and we're going to take them out of those public schools and we're going to put them in private schools. That is not school choice. That is the choice for those schools. Not every community has a private school. Every community has a public school.
Absolutely. And in the Office for Civil Rights, the second largest division in the Department of Education, we've seen several complaints where American citizens in red states complained that their child was not, were not receiving their IEPs or 504 services in charter schools that had taken tax dollars. And instead of providing those services, the charter school said, oh, well, just go back to your neighborhood school that we've defunded. And it's funny that you mentioned Kentucky, because we currently are union heard from a family in Kentucky that has an open sexual assault investigation complaint in the Office for Civil Rights, which was being worked on by attorneys in our Philadelphia office, which has been shuttered. Their elementary school age child was a victim of a sexual assault, and they received no relief from their school district or their state, and they used the federal government oversight arm for free recourse. And now they're without that recourse. Those are the things that the U.S. Department of Education did. We were not purveyors of woke ideology. We provided enforcement and oversight over the states.
Sharia, I want you to take a listen to what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said earlier today.
And the Department of Education plays a critical role in enforcing civil rights laws that prohibit discrimination. Who's going to do that now?
Any critical functions of the department, such as that, will remain. But again, we're greatly reducing the scale and the size of this department.
What about federal Title I funding and special education funding? Is that still good?
Same answer.
Sharia, devil is often in the details there. So they're keeping the function. They're just getting rid of some of the people who are supposed to carry out the function. How does any of that actually work?
It doesn't work. I have a BlackBerry in my kitchen right now. I can say I still have a BlackBerry, but does it actually function? No, it does not. In the same way, the Department of Education has not been functioning since this administration took office. They have slowed our work and they have fired our people. So what benefits does it mean? What does it benefit American people to have a law on the book if you actually have no one to actually enforce that law?
Can you guys pull up for me the poll from last month. It showed that just 37% of voters supported getting rid of the Department of Education. So yes, Chasten, I take the point that Angela makes that they have convinced a subset of Americans that their children are being indoctrinated in American schools, even though there is no actual proof positive to that point. And those parents are worried and they are concerned. And yes, perhaps they want to see a dismantling of the Department of Education. That is nowhere near a majority of Americans who believe that that is a good idea.
Yeah, and I think parents are right to be concerned. As a parent myself, you know what it's like to get up in the morning and try to pack the school lunches and get everybody out the door, go to work, do a good job raising your kids and participating in society and giving back to your community. And now imagine that some parents around the country, especially folks who might have a child with a disability, are wondering, is this going to impact my family? Is this going to make things even harder? Especially seeing that we're gutting things like the Civil Rights Office. What happens when somebody makes a mistake or when somebody hurts my child, especially a child with disabilities who might need that lawyer to step in and say, give this kid what they need, meet the IEP. Imagine what it's like to just go to bed wondering, is life going to be made that much harder for me and my family and for my child? And as that poll shows, the majority of American people support public education and want this administration to just leave schools and teachers and families alone.